National Park Service Arrowhead logo, Glacier National Park. Glacier National Park Conservancy logo, a special thanks to our funding partners. Mariah Gladstone, Native America Speaks, Two Medicine Campground, July 10th, 2019. A park ranger stands in a clearing surrounded by trees. She addresses an audience off of screen.
Before we begin, I do want to recognize this as the traditional territory of the Amskapi Pukani, or Blackfeet, Kalispel, Salish, and Kootenai tribes. So we just take a moment to recognize that. And I want to welcome you to the 35th year of the Native America Speaks program. This is the longest running Native America Speaks program in the National Park Service, which is very exciting. This program and other critical programs like it couldn't be possible without your donations to the Glacier National Park Conservancy. So thank you so much if you are a donor. Tonight I'd like to welcome a special guest, Mariah Gladstone. She is a member of the Blackfeet Nation as well as a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. She's been speaking and performing in and around the park since she was 4 years old. And then in recent years, she's been to Columbia University and currently focuses her efforts in cultural revitalization and indigenous foods. She's been recognized as one of the top 25 under 25 leaders in Indian country and as a champion for change through Aspen Institute. So without further ado, can we please welcome Mariah Gladstone.
The audience applauds and the park ranger walks out of screen. Mariah Gladstone, wearing a red coat, walks onto stage and then addresses the audience off of screen.
Hi guys. Firstly, gonna apologize for the number of cameras. Pay no attention to them. They do make me seem like I am far more important than I really am. But they're part of the park record and conservancy documentation of the Native America Speaks program. So more people will understand what the park is able to do here, and this really cool series that has been able to be implemented within the park system over the past 35 years, which is awesome. Welcome to Two Medicine. As I just mentioned, my name is Mariah Gladstone, and this evening I'll be sharing with you guys stories from around the area and hopefully giving you a deeper context into this area and our rich cultural history. Also want to mention this is definitely Blackfeet territory. Kalispel, Salish, they're on the other side of the mountains. So,
The camera view changes to show a wider angle of Mariah speaking.
Glacier, yes. We share sides of the Continental Divide. But right here, this is Blackfeet land. We good? With our park stories, what I'll be sharing with you are stories that Blackfeet people have told for the better part of 14,000 years. We have archaeological evidence that puts us here in this landscape since that period of time, and also traces our stories to this landscape. We're one of the very few tribes that's lucky enough to be on our traditional homeland. A lot of other tribes were relocated or consolidated, put on reserves with other tribes, and their stories are stories of relocation and removal and can be traced back to other locations. For the Blackfeet, our history is here, and we are lucky. If you guys are around this weekend, it's Indian Days, lots of stuff happening down in Browning, so if you make it down to Browning, definitely go check out our celebration and dancing and ultra red competition happening down in Browning, capital. But for tonight, these stories will encompass heroes and tricksters and some of our history that has led us to this point. So I'm gonna start us off with a hero story. So we were talking about bears before, and this incorporates a bear into the story, but it also requires kind of a climatological understanding of this place in the wintertime. So as you can guys probably imagine, this place gets piled up with snow in the winter. But we also have very strong winds that come over the mountains. So from the west, these great winds will blow, often 100 miles an hour. We've clocked it above that in many areas around the park. And temperatures can get very, very cold. And as snow piles up, drifts pile up, things would be uninhabitable except for a phenomenon known as the Chinook wind. Has anyone heard of the Chinook before? Okay. The Chinook wind is a warm, dry, westerly wind that comes over and will rapidly raise the temperature up. So it is the reason that Browning holds the world record for the highest temperature shift in 24 hours, -50 to 50 above Fahrenheit in 24 hours because of a Chinook wind rolling through in the wintertime. And for my ancestors, it was a critical factor that made this landscape right next to the mountains inhabitable throughout the year. Because every 2 to 3 weeks, the snow would melt off, temperatures would rise, our men could go out hunting and women could gather firewood, the bison would stay right next to the mountains all year round, and we were able to live even in temperatures that were dipping to 50 below. And so it was one winter in the long ago time that the Chinook wind did not come. And snow was piling up, things were freezing, and the people were waiting weeks and weeks. And finally, a young orphan boy decided that something wasn't quite right, and he went out on a quest to find what had happened. Now, this orphan boy becomes the hero of our story. He's not the biggest or the strongest. He's not like Superman built, right? But he is the person that is putting the village above himself. He is thinking about all of the people and how he can help them. And so in this selfless act, he goes out in this brutal cold and he calls out, "Oh, my animal elders, please come help." And 4 animals come down. There's a coyote, there's a weasel, there's an owl.
Mariah makes a symbol for an owl by bringing both of her hands up to her eyes and cupping them.
And there's a magpie. You guys know what magpies are? Black and white birds, and they talk a lot. They're gossips. It's a theme. And he calls out, and these 4 animals come down and gather around him, and they start talking to say, "What's up?" And this boy says, "Clearly something's not right with this weather. Do you know where the Chinook wind has gone?" And I kind of look around, and this magpie says, "Well, my cousin's wife's brother said that a big grizzly bear has taken the Chinook wind and has stole it and put it high up in the mountains in his lodge. And he's just sleeping with that warm Chinook wind." I'm going to have you guys make some signs. Okay, this is American Indian Sign Language, or Plains Indian Sign Language, and was used between different tribes that verbally spoke different languages to communicate using one set of signs. So imagine if you could learn one sign language and go and backpack all over Europe using just one set of signs. It was very efficient, not only for trading, but also maybe for intertribal dating, right? So this is one set of signs, but this is what happened. Bear, hands up.
Mariah shows the sign for bear, which is bringing both of her hands up to her ears, palms facing outwards towards the audience.
Can you growl? There we go. Stole, like you're hooking something. And
Mariah shows the sign for steal, where she holds one hand up in the air, palm downwards, with the other hand hooked with one finger. She then moves her hand to the side.
kind of a comical early Disney kind of steal. And then like this, Chinook.
Mariah then shows the sign for wind, which is to move both of her palms up and down in a wave-like motion.
The wind. So the bear stole the Chinook. So this boy takes off and he's like, well, I'm going to steal that Chinook wind back from the bear. And he takes off and he starts to walk out in this deep snow. And these animals say, we're coming with you. We want to help too. This no Chinook thing is not good for us either. So the 5 of them kind of take off on this ragtag adventure team. Not Avenger, but adventure team. So they take off and they start heading to the mountains, and they're climbing up to where they hear the bear's den is. And they get up, they see this big cave in the mountains, and they go, I think this is where the bear is. They said, Owl, you can see best in the dark. You want to check it out? And Owl pokes his head in there, and the bear had taken a stick and popped the owl in the eyes, left the owl with circles around his eyes. Owl comes out of there and he said, well, the bear's in there and he definitely has that bag and he doesn't want us messing with it. All right, these friends sit down and they're thinking, we have the Chinook, we just got to get it out, but there's a big bear standing between us and a nice winter. So they're thinking, and of course, even together, they're not going to be able to take on a grizzly bear. And so this boy says, oh, I have this medicine pouch. There's some plants in here. And if you burn them and you smell the smoke, it'll make you sleepy. And all right, and so they put together what they can and they build this little fire and they start putting these little plants on there. It starts making really, really smoky. You guys ever put like wet plants on something and just smokes everything? And they start blowing all of this smoke into the bear's lodge. And they're like, all right, I hope it worked. Weasel, can you go in and see if you can grab it? You're slippery. And this weasel creeps in. He finds this elkskin bag. Of course, the bear is sound asleep. And he pulls it out into the light of day. And quickly they start picking out the stitches of this elkskin bag. And as soon as they get it open a little bit, the wind comes out. And it starts blowing down this valley. And you know when wind starts howling? It starts blowing down this valley and just warming things up. The whole valley is filled with this wind. And of course the bear hears this howling and comes out, wakes up, and gives a big growl. Can everyone make this sign? This is the sign for angry.
Mariah makes the sign for angry by taking her fist and bringing it up to her forehead and rotating it on her forehead.
You can growl when you do it. It may be very helpful for you as you are traveling through glacier and perhaps lands beyond. If you get frustrated with your traveling companions, maybe that's a good start to a conversation. Just to signal a little bit without snapping at someone, right? This bear wakes up with a start and comes barreling out of his lodge and tries chasing this wind down this valley. And if you've ever tried chasing the wind, it is difficult, if not impossible. So of course the bear runs out, and as snow starts melting away, and he cries in frustration. But of course our friends, now heroes, these ragtag bunch of 5, break up, say their goodbyes to each other, and they go their separate ways. But they have a much easier time going back now that the snow has begun to melt from the valley. Plus it's downhill and they can belly slide the whole way. And now these men are able to go out and hunt. These women are able to gather firewood. People are able to be fed once again. And of course now bears don't stay awake and steal the wind. They sleep all winter long. Sorry, trying to not inhale mosquitoes when I'm talking. But apparently mosquitoes are attracted to carbon dioxide, so the number one way to get rid of them is stop breathing. It's difficult. So it's a classic example of a Blackfeet hero story. Of course, it's not about the biggest or the strongest, but the person that puts the community ahead of themselves. I'll tell another story. This one hopefully gives you guys a little sense of place. Who's been over to St. Mary yet? Been that way? You came over. Did you drive over Highway 49, Looking Glass? Okay, so you went kind of up over some windy mountains. If you're in a large RV, you may have been frustrated with your GPS. I used to work at the KOA over on the other side, and I'd always get people that are like, why is that road so terrible? I'm like, there's another way that's flatter, but we won't get into it. So if you come over from St. Mary is in the St. Mary River drainage that eventually will go into the Hudson's Bay. Here, we're in the Milk River drainage. It'll eventually go into the Missouri River, into the Mississippi, and down to the Gulf of Mexico. If you're in Kalispell, that water is going to the Pacific. Okay, so we have a continental or a triple divide in glacier, which is a cool geological phenomenon. Some of you may not care, but for the purposes of this story, as you dropped down that ridge coming from St. Mary, that first hill through that burn area, and you came down into the Milk River area, and came down into there, and then you went up and over another ridge. You got to Cut Bank area. So that's the Cut Bank drainage. There's a little more undeveloped part of the park in there on a dirt road. And then, of course, you come up over another ridge, and you're in the Two Medicine area, right? Getting a hang as we're going south over the winding rivers. So, of course, as you probably drove through that, you saw lots and lots of willows and wetlands. And maybe you were lucky enough to see a beaver. So this is a story about a beaver clan that lived originally in the Cut Bank River drainage. And White Fur was the chief of this beaver clan. So you know beavers, they build dams and they'll build lodges in the middle of the ponds that they create. Now White Fur had quite a big clan of beavers, and their pond was almost like a small lake. And White Fur was very proud of his beaver clan, and he went out when the ice broke up one year, and he went out to survey the food trees that were left. And he went around and he said, you know what? The food trees that are remaining are only going to last us a little over another year. And we're going to have to find a new home because there's not enough food for the size that our clan has become. So he calls a council in his lodge and he says, someone is going to have to go on a discovery mission to find a new home for us, to build a new dam and a new pond. And his oldest son, Loud Slap, spoke up. And Loud Slap says, I'll do it, I'll go. And of course, this is his oldest son. White Fur honestly considers him to be one of the smartest beavers at dam making, one of the wisest beavers in the clan, and he doesn't really want to send his oldest son because this is a dangerous mission. But of course it'd be kind of embarrassing if he was like, no, stay home. So he goes, okay, you can go on this discovery mission. And I had this dream. When White Fur tells his son about this dream, and he says, swim down river, past some of the other beaver clans that are along the Cut Bank River, and then you'll reach a point where if you look north, you'll see a low gap in the ridge. And if you go up and over that gap, I believe you'll find us a new home. but please travel during the day. That is when most of our enemies, the mountain lions, the wolverines, the wolves, are sleeping. And it'll be less dangerous if you travel during the day. So Loud Slap says, all right, I'll set out in the morning. And Loud Slap takes off early the next morning. And he sets off during the nighttime. So he's swimming downriver when it's safe. And he goes past all of these other beaver lodges that are built down on the Cut Bank River, and he tells all of them, they say, where are you going? And he says, I'm going on a discovery mission to find a new home. And they said, okay, good luck. And he takes off, and he reaches this place, and he kind of sees in the early morning light where this gap is. And he says, all right, let's do this. He takes a little nap, and he sets off. Of course, you guys were out in the sun today during the summer. It can get pretty hot. And for beavers, you guys have seen beavers, they're not really great at walking on dry land. They kind of waddle. And so Loud Slap was trying to climb this ridge, and he's kind of waddling up this ridge, and he's getting hot, and he's trying to go uphill, but it's slow going. And he goes, I think I can. No, wait, that's Thomas the Tank Engine, right? He says, I won't give up. And he's climbing up there, and it's getting hot. And finally, he gets to the top, and he sees all these willows down below, and he goes, there's water down there, I know it. But as he's going down, he can kind of belly slide down, and he cruises right into this nice little cold stream. He says, this is good. This will lead to where I think we can find a new home. And he follows it downriver to where it joins up with a bigger river. This, of course, what we know as the Milk River. And he swims around, he finds this nice big curve and a nice place where they could build a dam. And he goes, this will be the perfect spot to build a new home. There's plenty of food trees all around, lots of aspens and willows. And he goes, we can make a good life here. He didn't see any other beavers the whole time in this other river drainage, but that's fine. No one else to share food trees with, right? And he sleeps that night. He finds some driftwood that had piled up, and he sleeps inside it where it's nice and safe. And the next morning, he takes off and sets up, climbing back over this gap, back down. But as he's going down, he's so focused on trying to find the trail and think about the water that's coming, and he freezes, catches something on the wind. And he's in this little patch of shrubs, and he freezes, and he hears, and he looks around, and he sees a wolverine just sniffing its way out. And he's thinking, this is the end. I'm gonna die. And he freezes here, and he's just crying silently. And this wolverine's coming, and the wind is blowing in a certain way, and he goes, if the wolverine passes to the south, then I'll be okay. But if the wolverine passes to the north, he's gonna smell me, and it'll be the end. And he's thinking, he's like, what will it be like to die being eaten? And he's just crying, and this wolverine is coming closer. And can't even see the wolverine. It's just tucked away in this little group of shrubs, and hears it, and it passes to the south, and not too close, so he doesn't even catch his scent, and that wolverine moves on. And Loud Slap was so relieved he could have sang, but he didn't, because there was a wolverine nearby. And he quickly makes his way back down into the water, back down into the Cut Bank River, and he swims so fast. He goes back upriver through all of these different beaver ponds, and he's just paddling, and the water's just frothing. He's paddling so hard. And he makes it back, and he climbs, and he goes right to his father's lodge, right into the lodge of Loud Slap. Sorry, the lodge of White Fur. And he tells his father, hello, I'm back. His dad is overjoyed to see him. And he says, tell me about what you saw. And he tells him about all of his adventures. And tells them about this close encounter with the wolverine, but also there is a new place where there's plenty of food trees. And when the ice breaks up next year, we can move all of our people, our beaver people, to the other side. And they start making plans, and everyone's very eager to go to the other side. But of course, moving an entire village of beavers across a dangerous gap takes some planning. And so they work extra hard hauling these food trees down to sink so they have food for this next winter. And they start having to haul them a great distance, and it's dangerous. And they work well after the snow flies and until their pond has been frozen. And as soon as that pond unfreezes in the springtime, they're ready to head out. But of course, some of the beaver moms have young beaver kits with them, so they're not quite ready to make this trip. But a lot of these beavers, they're ready to go. So a lot of the young men and beaver women without beaver kits set off, and they make this journey. Fortunately, they all make it safe and sound, and they get right to work building their dam. And they work for 2 weeks straight just building a dam. Finally, they start backing up water, and then they start building lodges and enjoying this nice fresh growth of food trees. And finally, the beaver moms and kits come along a few months later, and the gang's all back together. And they live in their new beaver lodge for a couple of years. Actually, their new beaver pond for a couple of years. But of course, new kits grow up, and there are more kits born, and soon there are quite a few 3- and 4-year-old beavers that are bachelors and bachelorettes, right? And they're on the prowl looking for love. But of course, they're all related. They can't marry each other. And so they call a council, and they have to think about what they're going to do. And they say, well, we have 2 options here. We can either go farther downriver and see if there's any beavers farther back along this route, on this river, the Milk River, or we can go back over the gap to where we know there are beavers and see if they would like to marry our young bachelors and send their bachelors over to take beaver wives here. And there was a vote, and the majority was to go back over to where they knew there were beaver lodges in the Cut Bank River. So they send a whole bunch of young beaver bachelors over the mountains. But a week passes, and no beaver bachelors from the other clans had shown up. And there was beginning to be concern, and they said, I think something must have happened. I don't know what. But Loud Slap says, I'll go scout it out. I'll go check it out. And Loud Slap went over. He made it over this ridge, and he found the bodies of all of these beaver bachelors that had been eaten by wolves. And Loud Slap was very upset. And he swam down to the Cut Bank River to the other lodges, and he told them, he said, our young men were coming to take beaver wives here, but they were killed by wolves on their journey. And they mourned together. And they said, we will send some beaver men over to marry some of your beaver women, but also we have news. The chief of this first clan that Loud Slap had swam to said, we have some news. We hear that there's a new beaver in town, right? There was a beaver that had come over from the Two Medicine drainage, from this area, downriver here. And he'd come over to the Cut Bank drainage, and he moved in to your old pond. And they backed up that dam, and they reinforced it, and that water's backed up even further now into a new growth of food trees. And he calls himself Strong Dam. And Loud Slap said, that's not going to do. Because, of course, their plan, Whitefur's plan has always been to rotate back home to their original, and so the food trees can grow back and they can have 2 working ponds, and they rotate through. And Loud Slap says, well, we'll show that strong dam whose pond that is. Tell no one you saw me. And he goes back over the ridge. Loud Slap is getting much better at making this journey, building his strong beaver legs for climbing. But he makes it home, and of course he tells his dad what had happened to their beaver bachelors. And he said, there'll be some young beaver men along shortly, but there's a beaver named Strong Dam that has moved into our old pond. And Whitefur says, we're going to have to show that Strong Dam whose pond that is. And Whitefur is an old beaver. I mean, he's called Whitefur primarily because he's so old, he's kind of getting grizzled, right? And he goes, I may be old, but I can still fight. And he says, take our warriors. We're going to head over there. We're going to have ourselves a beaver battle. And so all these young men and some of the young women, some of the unmarried young women came and they made this journey back over to the Cutbank River. And they started heading up. But each time they went to a pond, these women said, you know, they started playing like a beaver cotillion or something, right? Like having a coming out ceremony. And these young beaver bachelors from the other ponds would ask the young beaver women from Whitefur's clan if they would marry them. And these women would say, we'll marry you, but first you need to fight for us at the upcoming beaver battle. And they said, of course we'll fight for you. Is that all you ask? Like, he who will not fight for his sweetheart should not have one. And Whitefur said, that gives me an idea. And each time as they went up further upriver towards their original lodge, they would make agreements, and these young beaver bachelors, now betrothed beaver bachelors, betrothed beaver men, would agree to fight. And they came up with this brigade, flotilla. What do you call a group of battle beavers? Swimming up, 100 or so beaver warriors coming, and they were quietly swimming through the water, and there was a young Blackfeet man on the shore of the water. His name was No Water, and he was there on his vision quest. And he sees 100 beavers silently creeping through the water. And he goes, are you real? Is this real? Am I seeing this in real life? And Whitefur said, shh, we're trying to ambush these people that have moved in to our pond. We're going to have a beaver battle here in a few minutes, and we should be fine, but if we need your help, please come to our aid. And No Water said, okay. He signed it. Silence. And these beaver came up over the dam, and quickly the water was just frothing with beaver fighting and squealing, and they had themselves a beaver battle. And of course, fast forward, Whitefur did indeed come out on top in this beaver battle, and Strong Dam's remaining beaver clan took off back to the Two Medicine drainage where they had come from. And Whitefur sent his wounded into the lodges to be cared for, and he came up to No Water and he said, you know, we didn't need your help, but we know you would have been there if we had needed it. And I want you to come back home with us over the mountains, or over the ridge to the Milk River. And I want to give you some beaver medicine that will help you stay strong and happy for the rest of your life. And Whitefur passed on some beaver medicine to No Water that kept it with the Blackfeet. It was a very long epic story about beavers. I'm sorry. I'm going to teach you guys a sign. Can you do this? It's a sign for beaver.
Mariah shows the sign for beaver. She holds one hand palm downwards, then brings another hand upwards sharply, making a slapping sound on the back of her hand.
I was doing a kids program one time and I did this, and I had not just told a story where I said beaver 200 times. So I asked them to guess what the sign was, and one of them goes, mosquito! Makes sense too. Yeah, it's kind of fun. You get to make slapping noises. Of course, this is the sign for owl.
Mariah shows the sign for owl, which is to take both hands and cup them around her eyes.
You guys want to guess what this sign is?
Then she shows the sign for eagle, which is to bring one finger up to her nose in a claw-like fashion.
An eagle. Yeah. Pita. Eagle. So, what am I looking at for time? Because I just realized I told a very long story. 5 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to wrap up with a trickster story. Our trickster in Blackfeet mythology is Nappy. So Nappy, can you guys say Nappy? So Nappy is an interesting character. Like tricksters in many different cultural mythologies, Nappy is complex. Nappy is kind of a man who helped the creator make the world and then kind of got himself into trouble roaming free on it. So, of course, Nappy has some selfish qualities. Of the 7 deadly sins, Nappy is guilty of 8 of them. We'll put it that way. But Nappy also has some shape-shifting abilities, and he is helpful in many ways to creating the world as we know it. So, in this story, Nappy came across a very handsome man who had these extraordinarily decorated leggings. And they were decorated in reds and oranges and yellows. And these leggings had a power. This man, Nappy of course was watching this happen, this man would run forward and a fire would start out in front of him. And this man could manipulate the fire to burn out a section of forest, and the animals from that section of forest would come running forward. And that man lifted his bow up, saw an elk, and he shot that elk. And Nappy, who is of course always looking for the easiest way to get a meal, saw this and kind of approached the man, strolled up while this man was going down to his new elk, and he said, "Oh, wow, what a beautiful elk." And this man said, "Oh, Nappy, I see you there." Nappy, he's pretty famous, obviously. So of course Nappy, this guy knows my name. That's good, good, as he should. And he comes down and he said, "You know, Nappy, I have this elk. Will you stay and eat some of this elk with me? I could also use some help cleaning it up and cleaning the hide and hanging some of this meat out." And Nappy said, "Sure, thank you so much." And they sat down and they had themselves a meal, and it was getting dark at that point. And Nappy was kind of hanging out a little longer. This man said, "You know, it's late. You can stay in my lodge." And Nappy said, "Thank you so much." And so they set up, and this man went to sleep, and he had hung his leggings over the teepee liner. And Nappy saw this, and this is my chance. This is the perfect opportunity. And he sneaks over while this man is sleeping, and he grabs the leggings and he takes out of the door and runs a couple hours. He runs away and makes sure he has some good distance between him and this man. And he goes down to sleep, curls up with these leggings, and he wakes up. Things are bright, sun's up in his eyes, and he's back inside this guy's teepee. He's a little confused, a little uncomfortable, but of course he doesn't want to pretend, he doesn't want to acknowledge he just stole these leggings. So he says, "Oh, hello, good morning." And he said, "Nappy, why do you have my leggings?" And Nappy said, "Well, I heard footsteps outside last night, and I was worried that someone was going to steal your leggings, so I was protecting them." And this man said, "Oh, thank you for that. I'm going to make this much faster and say, for 2 more nights this happened. Nappy hung out. He helped this guy with some little tasks. Of course, Nappy was being put to work. Didn't quite realize how much work he'd have to put in order to get this free meal and try to take these leggings, but he wanted them because he wanted to be able to shoot fire out of his legs too. On the 3rd morning, when Nappy woke up, of course he'd ran as far as he could away, went to sleep just before he could see the light, and this man woke him up and said, Nappy, of course he's back in his lodge, Nappy, it seems like you would really like these leggings. Why don't I just give them to you as a gift? And Nappy said, oh, really? Thank you. And this man said, but you can only use these leggings 3 times in a day. No more. By this time, these two are out by St. Mary Lake. You guys know that area, obviously by St. Mary. And on the banks, they're called the Lakes Within to the Blackfeet, the Lower St. Mary and Upper St. Mary. So they're down close to these lakes. And Nappy takes these leggings, and now he doesn't have to hang out here and help this guy with tasks anymore. So he thanks him and goes on his way. And of course, Nappy tests these leggings out, and he's like, that's pretty cool. Found it pretty easy to manipulate this fire, and he starts going out and remembers he didn't pack any food from this guy. So he burns a little patch, and a little rabbit comes out. So he gets this little rabbit and cooks up some rabbit and just leaves the rest of the rabbit there. It's not good form, if you don't know. Hunter ethics, guys. Of course, he takes off a little bit later, and he runs around. He gets a prairie chicken this time from burning the forest. A little prairie chicken comes out, and he kills this prairie chicken, has himself a nice fat prairie chicken lunch. And later that night, he's like, oh, I really want some juicy game. That's what I really want. He said, I've used these leggings, but the first time was really more of a test, and I'll only use them 2 times tomorrow. All right, leave them 4 times today, 2 times tomorrow, that'll work, be fine. So he takes off, and he's gonna go get himself some, whatever's in the woods, I guess, deer, elk, something. So he takes off, and instead of setting a fire in front of him, the leggings themselves burst into fire. Nappy bursts into fire. He's, oh, ow, ow. And he's on fire, and he turns, and he runs, of course, to the lake because it's right there. And as he runs into the water, of course, these leggings, which had been on fire, these beautiful buckskin with quill work, just turn into burnt shards all around him. So Nappy's standing, he's like half naked in the water now. He's cold. He's pretty hungry at this point, and he's kind of sleep deprived from staying up every night and trying to steal these guys' leggings. So he's very upset at this point, and of course, he's coming out of the water just dripping wet, and he sees this man standing on the shore of this lake, and Nappy's really tired of this guy now, because of course he's angry, and he's hangry and taking things out on the guy. And this man comes up and he said, Nappy, I told you not to use those leggings more than 3 times. And Nappy's grumbling. He goes, here's what I want to know. How come every time I try to take these leggings from you, you were always right there, and I always woke up back in your lodge, right? He's getting very upset at this point. And this man said, you know, Nappy, you never even asked my name, because I'm not just a man. I am Natosi. I am the sun. And no matter how far you travel, no matter how far you go, you are always in the sun's lodge. And I'll leave you guys with that. I'll stick around for a little while if you guys have questions. I will be here, hopefully without microphones. No. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your stay in Glacier, and I hope you make it down to Browning to check out Indian Days.
The screen fades to black, and credits are shown on the screen. Presented by Mariah Gladstone, Jordan Steele. Filmed by Hannah Schwalbe, Alexander Stilson, Daniel Lombardi, Quinn Feller, Jill Bridgman. Edited by Alexander Stilson. Glacier National Park Conservancy logo, a special thanks to our funding partners. National Park Service Arrowhead logo, Glacier National Park.